The iron shackles around Violet Kensington's wrists had rubbed her skin raw during the 3-day journey from Kansas City. But the physical pain paled in comparison to the humiliation burning in her chest as she stood in the dusty trading post outside Wyatt, Missouri, watching her uncle haggle over her worth like she was nothing more than livestock. 2 horses, her uncle repeated, his tobacco-stained teeth showing through a gap-toothed grin. That's my final offer for the girl. She's healthy, can work, and she's got breeding years ahead of her. Violet wanted to scream, to run, to disappear into the earth itself, but the rope around her waist kept her tethered to the hitching post. The year was 1878, and she had learned the hard way that women in her position had no rights, no voice, and certainly no choice in their own fate. Her uncle had taken her in after her parents died of scarlet fever 2 years ago, but instead of providing the sanctuary she desperately needed, he had worked her like a mule on his failing farm and beaten her when she dared to complain. Now, drowning in gambling debts and desperate for anything of value, he had brought her here to this God-forsaken corner of Missouri to trade her away. The man examining her with cold, calculating eyes was named Dutch Merkson, a notorious outlaw who ran a gang that terrorized the countryside between Missouri and the Oklahoma Territory. He was in his late 40s, with a scarred face and hands that had clearly taken many lives. Violet had heard whispers about him in town, about the women he kept in his camp, about what happened to those who displeased him. 1 horse, Dutch countered, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. She looks half-starved and probably cannot even cook a decent meal. 2 horses or no deal, her uncle insisted, though his voice wavered slightly. Even he seemed nervous around Dutch Merkson. Before Dutch could respond, another voice cut through the tension like a knife through butter. I will give you 3 horses for her, and $100 besides. All 3 of them turned to see a tall cowboy approaching from the direction of the stable. He was younger than Dutch by at least 2 decades, probably around 25 or 26, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of aged whiskey. He wore dusty riding clothes and a hat that had seen better days, but there was something about the way he carried himself that commanded attention. His gun belt sat low on his hips, and Violet noticed his right hand rested casually near the revolver, not threatening but ready. "Who the hell are you?" Dutch demanded, his own hand moving toward his weapon. "Name's Hayes Lawson," the cowboy said evenly, his gaze never leaving Dutch's face. "I've been tracking you for 3 weeks, Merkson. You murdered a family outside of Springfield, including 2 children. There's a price on your head, and I aim to collect it." The trading post yard erupted into chaos. Dutch went for his gun, but Hayes was faster. The shot rang out clear and true, and Dutch Merkson dropped to the ground, a red stain spreading across his chest. 2 of Dutch's men who had been waiting by their horses drew their weapons, but Hayes had already taken cover behind a water trough, returning fire with deadly accuracy. Violet's uncle released her rope and ran for his wagon, leaving her standing there exposed in the middle of the gunfight. A bullet whizzed past her head and Violet dropped to the ground, covering her ears against the deafening sound of gunfire. Through the dust and smoke, she saw Hayes taking down Dutch's men with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. When the shooting finally stopped, 3 bodies lay in the dirt, and Hayes was walking toward her with his gun still drawn, scanning the area for any remaining threats. "Are you hurt?" he asked, holstering his weapon and kneeling beside her. Violet shook her head, unable to find her voice. Her hands were trembling, and she realized she was shaking all over. Hayes pulled a knife from his boot and cut through the rope at her waist, then carefully removed the shackles from her wrists. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he examined the raw skin underneath. "These need cleaning," he said quietly. "There's a doctor in Wyatt about 5 miles east of here." "My uncle," Violet managed to say, looking around for the wagon. But her uncle had already disappeared down the road, apparently deciding she was not worth the trouble of whatever came next. "He's gone," Hayes confirmed. "Probably halfway to Kansas by now." Violet felt tears burning her eyes, though whether they were from relief, anger, or despair, she could not say. "What happens to me now?" Hayes stood and offered her his hand. "That's entirely up to you, miss. You are free to go wherever you want. I will take you to town if you like, or if you have family elsewhere, I can put you on a stagecoach." "Free." The word felt foreign on her tongue. "Free," Hayes repeated firmly. "No one owns you. No one has the right to trade you or sell you or treat you like property. You are a human being, and you deserve to be treated as such." Violet took his hand and let him help her to her feet. Her legs felt unsteady, and the world seemed to tilt slightly. Hayes steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "When did you last eat?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Yesterday morning," she admitted. "My uncle said food was too expensive to waste on someone who was about to be someone else's problem." Hayes's jaw tightened, and Violet saw a flash of anger in his eyes. "Well, you are nobody's problem now. Come on, let's get you fed and those wounds tended to." He led her to his horse, a magnificent bay gelding with intelligent eyes. Hayes helped her into the saddle, then swung up behind her. Violet tensed at the proximity, but Hayes kept a respectful distance, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. "What is your name?" he asked as they started down the road toward Wyatt. "Violet Kensington." "It is nice to meet you, Violet, though I wish it had been under better circumstances." They rode in silence for a while, and Violet found herself relaxing slightly against the steady rhythm of the horse's gait. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally. "You could have just taken Dutch and left." Hayes was quiet for a moment before answering. "My sister was in a situation similar to yours once. A man tried to buy her from our father when she was 17, after our mother died. Our father was a drunk and needed money for his next bottle. I was only 15, but I stole her away in the middle of the night and we ran. We made it to our aunt's house in St. Louis, and she took us both in. My sister is married now, has 3 children and a good life, but I never forgot how scared she was, how helpless. When I saw you standing there, I saw her. I could not just walk away." Violet felt tears sliding down her cheeks, though she tried to wipe them away before Hayes could notice. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." "You would have found a way to save yourself," Hayes said. "You have survived this long. That takes strength." Wyatt, Missouri was a modest town with a main street lined with wooden buildings, including a general store, a saloon, a church, and a small hotel. Hayes took Violet directly to the doctor's office, where an elderly man named Dr. Patterson cleaned and bandaged her wrists while clucking his tongue in disapproval at the condition she was in. "You need rest and proper meals," the doctor told her sternly. "And these wounds need to be kept clean and dry for at least a week." Hayes paid the doctor from his own pocket, despite Violet's protests that she had no way to repay him. "Consider it a gift," he said simply. The next stop was the hotel, where Hayes secured her a room for a week and paid in advance. Then he took her to the restaurant next door and ordered her a full meal: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Violet ate slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm as her starving body responded to the food. Hayes watched her with a small smile. "Take your time." No one is going to take it from you." When she finally pushed her plate away, full for the first time in recent memory, Violet looked at Hayes with renewed curiosity. "Are you a bounty hunter?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "I also do ranch work, guide wagon trains, and take odd jobs as they come." "Bounty hunting pays well, but it is not exactly steady work." "Where is home for you?" Hayes shrugged. "Nowhere in particular. I move around a lot. My sister keeps telling me I need to settle down, find a good woman, and start a family, but I have not found the right place yet." "What are you looking for?" He considered this. "I suppose I will know it when I find it. Somewhere I can build something that lasts, something I can be proud of." They talked for hours, and Violet found herself opening up to Hayes in a way she had not done with anyone since her parents died. She told him about her childhood on a small farm outside Kansas City, about her mother's love of singing and her father's skill with woodworking. She told him about the fever that took them both within days of each other, about the nightmare that followed when her uncle took her in. Hayes listened without judgment, his eyes full of compassion and understanding. When she finally ran out of words, he reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. "You have been through hell," he said quietly, "but you are out of it now. Whatever happens next, it is your choice. Your life belongs to you." That night, alone in her hotel room with clean sheets and a locked door, Violet cried herself to sleep, but they were not tears of despair. For the first time in 2 years, she was crying tears of relief. Over the next few days, Hayes remained in Wyatt, checking on Violet regularly but giving her space to rest and recover. He took care of the legal matters surrounding Dutch Merkson's death, collecting the bounty and dealing with the sheriff's questions. He also made inquiries about any available work in the area, as if he was considering staying for a while. Violet used the time to regain her strength. She bathed until her skin was pink and clean, and she mended the few clothes she owned. The hotel owner's wife, a kind woman named Mrs. Thornton, took pity on her and gave her 2 dresses that no longer fit her own daughters. They were simple calico dresses, but to Violet they felt like the finest silk. On the 4th day, Hayes knocked on her door in the late afternoon. "Feel like taking a walk?" he asked. Violet nodded eagerly. She had been cooped up in the hotel for days and was desperate for fresh air and sunshine. They walked through town together, Hayes pointing out various landmarks and introducing her to some of the locals. People seemed to respect him, Violet noticed. They tipped their hats and called him by name, and several mentioned they were glad he had taken care of Dutch Merkson. "You have been here before," Violet observed. "A few times," Hayes confirmed. "I did some work for a rancher outside of town last year, helped him move a herd to market. Good people around here, for the most part." They walked beyond the edge of town to a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. The water burbled over smooth stones and birds sang in the branches above. Hayes helped Violet climb down the bank, and they sat on a flat rock with their feet dangling over the water. "This is beautiful," Violet said softly. "I thought you might like it. I used to come here when I needed to think." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water flow past. Finally, Violet worked up the courage to ask the question that had been weighing on her mind. "What happens when the week is up? When the hotel room you paid for runs out?" Hayes turned to look at her, and Violet was struck again by how kind his eyes were. "What do you want to happen?" "I do not know," she admitted. "I have no money, no family that wants me, no skills that anyone would pay for. I suppose I could try to find work as a maid or a cook, but I am not very good at either." "What are you good at?" Violet thought about this. "I can read and write. My mother taught me, and I used to help her keep the farm accounts. I am good with numbers, and I like animals. I always took care of the chickens and the milk cow on our farm." Hayes nodded slowly, as if considering something. "There is a woman in town, Mrs. Dawson, who runs the general store. Her husband died last winter, and she has been struggling to manage the business alone. I heard her telling someone she needs help with the bookkeeping and inventory. The pay would not be much to start, but she has a room above the store she might let you use." Hope flickered in Violet's chest. "Do you think she would hire me?" "There is only one way to find out. I will introduce you tomorrow if you like." "Why are you doing all this for me?" Violet asked suddenly. "You have already done so much. You saved me, you fed me, you gave me a place to stay. You do not owe me anything else." Hayes was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the flowing water. "Maybe I am being selfish," he said finally. "Maybe I am helping you because it helps me feel like I am making up for all the times I could not help my sister. Or maybe I am helping you because when I look at you, I see someone worth helping. Someone strong and brave who deserves a chance at a good life." Violet felt her cheeks flush, and her heart began to beat faster. "I am not brave. You are braver than you know. You survived your uncle. You stood in that trading post yard and did not break, even when you must have been terrified. You are here now, ready to start over. That takes courage." Their eyes met, and Violet felt something shift between them, something she could not quite name but that made her stomach flutter and her breath catch. Hayes seemed to feel it too, because he looked away quickly, clearing his throat. "We should head back before it gets dark," he said, standing and offering her his hand once more. The next morning, Hayes took Violet to meet Mrs. Dawson at the general store. She was a woman in her mid-50s with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked Violet up and down critically, then asked her a series of questions about her education and experience. "Can you start today?" Mrs. Dawson asked when Violet had finished answering. "Yes, madam," Violet said eagerly. "The pay is $20 a month plus room and board. You will work 6 days a week, 8 in the morning until 6 at night. Sundays you have off for church and rest. The room upstairs is small, but it is clean and private. Does that suit you?" "Yes, madam. Thank you so much." Mrs. Dawson's stern expression softened slightly. "Hayes told me what you have been through. I admire your spirit, girl. Now let us see if you can actually do the work." Violet threw herself into the job with determination. She organized the storeroom, updated the inventory ledgers, and helped customers with patience and courtesy. Mrs. Dawson proved to be a fair employer, strict but kind, and she seemed pleased with Violet's work. Hayes stopped by the store every day, always with some excuse. He needed supplies, or he wanted to check on a special order, or he was just passing by. Violet looked forward to these visits more than she wanted to admit. They would talk for a few minutes, and Hayes always found a way to make her smile with a funny story or an observation about the town's characters. 2 weeks after Violet started working at the store, Hayes came in looking troubled. "I have a job offer," he told her. "Driving a herd from Texas to Kansas. It pays well, but I would be gone for at least 3 months. Violet felt her heart sink, though she tried not to show it. "That sounds like a good opportunity." "It is," Hayes agreed, "but I am not sure I want to take it." "Why not?" He looked at her intently. "Because I do not want to leave Wyatt right now." The air between them crackled with unspoken feelings. Violet knew she should say something, but she could not find the words. She was falling in love with Hayes Lawson, had been since the moment he cut the shackles from her wrists, but she had no idea if he felt the same way. He was a good man who had shown her kindness when she needed it most, but that did not mean his feelings went any deeper than compassion and friendship. "You should not turn down good work on my account," Violet said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it is not just on your account?" Hayes asked. "What if I am staying because I cannot imagine leaving you?" Violet's breath caught. "Hayes, I know it is too soon," he continued, the words coming faster now. "I know you have been through trauma and you need time to heal. I know I have no right to burden you with my feelings when you are just starting to build a new life. But I have to tell you, Violet, every day I wake up and the first thing I think about is you. Every night I lie awake wondering if you are safe, if you are happy, if you need anything. I am falling in love with you and I do not know how to stop it. I do not want to stop it." Tears filled Violet's eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. "You are not burdening me. I feel the same way. I think I have since the beginning, but I was afraid to hope. I was afraid you only saw me as someone who needed rescuing." Hayes crossed the store in 3 long strides and took her hands in his. "You are so much more than that. You are smart and strong and beautiful. When you smile, it lights up the whole room. When you talk about your parents, I can hear the love in your voice. When you work, I see your determination and your pride in doing things well. I see all of you, Violet, and I love what I see." "I love you too," Violet whispered. And then Hayes was kissing her, gentle but passionate, and Violet felt like she was finally, truly home. Mrs. Dawson cleared her throat loudly from the back of the store. "That is all very romantic, but we do have customers, Miss Kensington." They broke apart, both blushing, and Violet saw Mrs. Dawson trying to hide a smile as she pretended to rearrange some canned goods. Hayes started courting Violet properly after that, with the full approval of Mrs. Dawson and most of the town. He took her to church socials and town dances. They went on picnics by the creek and long walks in the evening. Hayes taught her to ride a horse, and Violet taught him to appreciate poetry, reading to him from a volume of Wordsworth she borrowed from the church library. They talked about everything, their hopes and dreams, their fears and regrets, their visions for the future. Hayes told her about his childhood, about growing up with an alcoholic father and learning to be strong for his sister. Violet shared more about her own past, the good memories and the painful ones, and Hayes listened with patience and understanding. 3 months after they met, Hayes asked Violet to marry him. They were sitting by the creek again, the same spot where they had first talked about her future. The late September evening was cool, and leaves were just beginning to turn gold and red in the trees. "I do not have much to offer you," Hayes said honestly. "I have some money saved from bounty hunting, and I have been looking at land for sale outside of town. There is a nice piece with a creek running through it, good for cattle and horses. I think I could build us a home there, start a ranch. It would be hard work and we would not be rich, but we would have each other. We would have a life we built together." Violet looked at the man she loved, this good, honest, hard-working cowboy who had set her free and then won her heart. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in October of 1878 in the small church in Wyatt, with Mrs. Dawson and half the town in attendance. Violet wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Dawson had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. Hayes wore his best suit, his dark hair slicked back, looking more handsome than Violet had ever seen him. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through good times and bad. When it came time for their vows, Hayes took both of Violet's hands and looked into her eyes with such love that it took her breath away. "Violet Kensington, you came into my life when I least expected it, and you changed everything. You taught me what it means to be brave, what it means to start over, what it means to hope. I promise to love you, protect you, and stand by your side for the rest of my days. I promise to build a home with you, to work hard for our future, and to never take for granted the gift of your love. You are my heart, my soul, my everything." Violet was crying as she said her own vows. "Hayes Lawson, you saved my life in more ways than one. You showed me kindness when I had forgotten what it felt like. You gave me freedom, and then you gave me your heart. I promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to work beside you, to dream with you, to build a life that honors the second chance you gave me. You are my home, my safety, my love." When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Hayes kissed her tenderly, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at the hotel, with food donated by various townspeople and music provided by a local fiddle player. Violet danced with her husband, laughing as he twirled her around the room. She felt beautiful and loved and impossibly happy. That night, in the small house Hayes had rented for them while he worked on building their ranch, Violet lay in her husband's arms and marveled at how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a slave in all but name, traded like property, with no hope for the future. Now she was a wife, a businesswoman with skills and purpose, and most importantly, she was free. Free to love, free to dream, free to live. "What are you thinking about?" Hayes asked, stroking her hair. "I am thinking about how grateful I am, how lucky I am to have found you." "I am the lucky one," Hayes insisted. "I found you, and I found a reason to stop running. I found home." Over the following months, they worked together to build their ranch. Hayes had purchased 200 acres with good grazing land and a natural spring that fed into a creek. The land was about 3 miles outside of Wyatt, far enough for privacy but close enough to reach town easily. Hayes worked on building their house, a sturdy 2-story structure with large windows to let in light, and a wraparound porch perfect for sitting on summer evenings. Violet continued working at the general store, saving every penny to help purchase cattle and supplies for the ranch. They scrimped and saved, worked dawn to dusk, and slowly but surely their dream began to take shape. By spring of 1879, the house was finished and they were able to move in. It was not large or fancy, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and their own sweat. Violet planted a garden with vegetables and flowers, and Hayes built a chicken coop and bought a milk cow. They purchased 20 head of cattle and 2 breeding horses, laying the foundation for what they hoped would grow into a prosperous ranch. Life was hard but good. Hayes proved to be everything Violet had hoped for in a husband: loving, respectful, hardworking, and honest. He never raised his voice to her in anger, never laid a hand on her in anything but love. He valued her opinions and made decisions with her, treating her as an equal partner in every way. Violet discovered she had a talent for managing the ranch's finances and keeping track of the livestock. She also proved to be an excellent cook, much to Hayes's delight. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch and watch the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Hayes with his arm around Violet's shoulders, both of them content in the life they were creating. In the summer of 1879, Violet discovered she was pregnant. She told Hayes one evening over supper, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, then a huge grin spread across his face and he let out a whoop of joy. "We are going to have a baby," he said, picking her up and spinning her around. "Violet, that is wonderful. You are happy?" she asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy, I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled." He set her down gently, suddenly worried. "Are you all right? Should you be working so hard?" "We need to get Dr. Patterson out here to check on you." Violet laughed at his concern. "I am fine, Hayes. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. But yes, we should have the doctor come by, just to make sure everything is progressing well." The pregnancy was not easy. Violet suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and Hayes hovered over her anxiously, making her rest and insisting on taking over most of her chores. But as her belly grew and she felt the baby moving inside her, Violet found a new kind of joy she had never experienced before. Hayes talked to her belly every night, telling the baby about the ranch and the life they were going to have. He built a cradle with his own hands, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Violet sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full of anticipation. In March of 1880, after a long and difficult labor, Violet gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel James Lawson after both of their fathers. Hayes cried when he held his son for the first time, cradling the tiny bundle with infinite gentleness. "He is perfect," Hayes whispered. "Violet, you did so well. He is absolutely perfect." "He has your eyes," Violet said, exhausted but happy. "He has your strength," Hayes replied, kissing her forehead. "I love you so much." Becoming parents changed them both. Hayes threw himself into building the ranch with renewed determination, driven by the need to provide for his family. Violet discovered a fierceness in herself she had not known existed, a mama bear instinct to protect her child at all costs. Samuel was a good baby, healthy and curious, with a ready smile that lit up the whole house. The ranch prospered over the next few years. Hayes proved to be an excellent rancher, and their herd grew steadily. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men from town who needed employment. Violet managed the household and the finances, and took pride in watching their savings grow. In 1882, Violet gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Alina, after Hayes's sister and Violet's mother. Rose was tiny and delicate, with dark curls and green eyes. Samuel, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch thrived, the children grew, and Hayes and Violet's love deepened with each passing year. They had their challenges, of course. There were droughts and harsh winters, sick cattle and broken equipment, sleepless nights with teething babies and childhood illnesses. But they faced everything together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they had built. In 1884, Hayes's sister Alina came to visit with her husband and 3 children. It was the first time Hayes had seen her since his wedding, and the reunion was joyful and emotional. Alina embraced Violet like a sister, thanking her for making Hayes so happy. "I have never seen him like this," Alina told Violet one evening while they washed dishes together. "He was always so restless before, always moving from place to place like he was searching for something. But now he has found it. He has found peace and purpose. That is all because of you." "It is because of both of us," Violet corrected gently. "We saved each other." Alina's visit lasted 2 weeks, and it was wonderful to have family around, to watch the cousins play together and to share meals and stories. When they finally left, Hayes stood on the porch with his arm around Violet, watching the wagon disappear down the road. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me this. A home, a family, a reason to put down roots. I spent so many years running from my past, afraid to settle down because I thought I would fail like my father did. But you showed me I could be different. We could be different." Violet turned in his arms to face him. "We are different. We are building something good here, Hayes. Something that will last." And it did last. The years passed and the ranch grew. They added more land, more cattle, more horses. Hayes earned a reputation as an honest, hard-working rancher, and other ranchers in the area sought his advice. Violet became known for her charity work, organizing fundraisers for the church and helping newcomers to the area get established. Samuel grew into a strong, capable boy who loved working alongside his father. Rose was gentle and creative, always drawing pictures or making up stories. In 1886, Violet gave birth to twin boys, Thomas and William, who were as mischievous as they were adorable. The house that had seemed so large when they first built It now felt full of life and noise and love. There were always children running through the rooms, dogs barking, horses neighing in the corral. The dinner table was crowded with family, the evenings filled with laughter and stories. Violet sometimes thought back to that terrible day in the trading post yard, when she had been so close to losing everything. It seemed like another lifetime, another person. The frightened, broken girl she had been was gone, replaced by a confident woman who knew her own strength and worth. Hayes had given her freedom, but she had chosen to stay. She had chosen him, chosen this life, chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes of her pain. And it had been the best choice she ever made. On their 10th wedding anniversary in October of 1888, Hayes took Violet back to the creek where he had first told her he loved her. The children were staying overnight with Mrs. Dawson, giving them a rare evening alone together. The autumn air was crisp and cool, the leaves brilliant shades of gold and crimson. They sat on their rock by the water, just as they had done so many times before. Hayes pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper and handed it to Violet. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a beautiful silver locket on a delicate chain. Violet opened it to find two tiny photographs, one of Hayes and one of their 4 children. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "Hayes, this must have cost a fortune." "You are worth every penny," he said, fastening the locket around her neck. "I wanted you to have something special, something that shows how much you and our children mean to me. You are my whole world, Violet." She kissed him, pouring 10 years of love and gratitude into it. "I love you so much. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you for choosing to stay," Hayes replied. "I offered you freedom, but you gave me something infinitely more valuable. You gave me your heart." They stayed by the creek until the stars came out, talking and dreaming about the future. They talked about Samuel potentially taking over the ranch someday, about Rose's talent for drawing and whether they should send her to a school in St. Louis to study art. They talked about watching their children grow up, about growing old together on the land they loved. "You have any regrets?" Hayes asked suddenly. Violet thought about this carefully. "I regret the pain I went through before I met you. I regret losing my parents, but I do not regret anything that happened after that day in the trading post. Every choice I have made since then, I would make again without hesitation. This life we have built, this family, this love, it is everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed possible." "No regrets," Hayes agreed, kissing her temple. "Only gratitude." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. The children grew and changed. Samuel, at 16, was already as tall as his father and eager to take on more responsibility at the ranch. Rose, at 14, was beautiful and kind, with suitors already starting to come calling, much to Hayes's dismay. The twins, at 8, were still full of energy and mischief, keeping Violet constantly on her toes. In 1892, a severe drought hit Missouri, testing the ranchers in the area. Many struggled, losing cattle and going into debt. But Hayes and Violet, through careful planning and conservative management, were able to weather the crisis. They even helped their neighbors when they could, lending money or supplies to those who needed it most. Their generosity was remembered and appreciated, strengthening their ties to the community. The Lawson Ranch became known not just for its prosperity, but for the kindness and integrity of its owners. Samuel met a girl named Catherine Williams at a church social in 1894, and Hayes and Violet watched with knowing smiles as their son fell head over heels in love. Catherine was a sweet girl from a good family, and Violet could see that she made Samuel happy. When Samuel asked for their blessing to marry Catherine, they gave it gladly. The wedding was held at the ranch in June of 1895, with half the county in attendance. Violet cried as she watched her firstborn son exchange vows with his bride, remembering her own wedding day 17 years earlier. Hayes squeezed her hand, understanding without words what she was feeling. "He is a good man," Hayes whispered. "We raised him right." "We did," Violet agreed, her heart full. Samuel and Catherine built a small house on the ranch property, and Samuel took on more and more of the day-to-day operations. Hayes, now in his mid-40s, was happy to step back a bit, spending more time with Violet and their younger children. They took trips to St. Louis and Kansas City, showing the children the wider world beyond their rural Missouri ranch. Rose, true to her artistic nature, went to study at a girls' academy in St. Louis when she turned 16, though she came home for holidays and summers. She wrote long letters about her classes and her friends, about the art museums and theaters. Violet saved every letter, proud of her daughter's accomplishments. The twins eventually calmed down as they grew older, channeling their energy into working on the ranch. They were different from Samuel in temperament, more adventurous and less interested in settling down, but they were good boys who loved their family and worked hard. In 1898, on the 20th anniversary of their wedding, Hayes and Violet renewed their vows in the same church where they had been married. All 4 of their children were there, along with Samuel's wife Catherine and their infant son, the first grandchild. Mrs. Dawson, now in her 70s and retired, sat in the front row and cried tears of joy. The preacher spoke about the enduring power of love, about how Hayes and Violet had built a life and a legacy that would continue for generations. When they repeated their vows to each other, Violet thought about how much they had both changed, and yet how much had stayed the same. They were older now, with lines on their faces and gray in their hair, but the love in Hayes's eyes was exactly the same as it had been on that first day by the creek. "I love you more today than I did 20 years ago," Hayes said, holding both her hands. "I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. My love for you grows with every breath I take, and it will continue until my last breath and beyond." "You are my home," Violet replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You have been my home since the moment you freed me, and you will be my home forever. I chose to stay then, and I choose to stay now, tomorrow, and always. I love you, Hayes Lawson, with all that I am and all that I will ever be." Their kiss was tender and full of 20 years of shared life, of memories and love and unbreakable commitment. The congregation erupted in applause, and their children cheered. The celebration afterward was magnificent. The entire town seemed to turn out, along with ranchers from neighboring counties and friends from as far away as Kansas City. There was music and dancing, food and drink, laughter and joy. Violet danced with Hayes, with her sons, with old friends and new. She watched her husband twirl their granddaughter around the dance floor and felt her heart might burst with happiness. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the yard, Violet stood on the porch of the house Hayes had built for her 2 decades ago and looked out at the scene before her. Her family, her friends, her community, all gathered together in celebration of love and commitment. The ranch stretched out behind them, prosperous and beautiful, a testament to everything they had built together. Hayes came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. "Blissfully," she replied. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I get to have all of this." "You deserve every bit of it," Hayes said firmly. "You fought for it, worked for it, chose it. This life is yours because you earned it." "We earned it," Violet corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "Together." "Together," Hayes agreed, kissing her softly. "Always together." They stood there for a long time, watching the party continue around them, comfortable in each other's presence as only two people who have shared a life can be. The stars came out one by one, brilliant against the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. "Do you remember what you told me that first day?" Violet asked. "When you cut the shackles from my wrists, I told you that you were free. You did. And I remember thinking that I did not know what to do with freedom, that I had forgotten what it felt like. But then you showed me. You showed me that freedom was not just about not being owned by someone else. It was about choosing your own path, building your own life, loving who you want to love. And who did you choose to love?" Hayes asked with a smile, though he knew the answer. "You," Violet said simply. "I chose you. I will always choose you." As the night deepened and the party eventually wound down, Hayes and Violet said good night to their guests and retired to their bedroom. They lay in bed talking quietly, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a trading post yard to a thriving ranch, from strangers to soulmates, they had traveled so far together. 20 years, Hayes marveled. "It feels like forever and like no time at all." "I know what you mean," Violet agreed. "Sometimes I still see that young cowboy who rode up and saved me, and other times I look at you and I see every year we have lived, every moment we have shared." "I hope we have at least 20 more years together," Hayes said. "Probably more like 40 or 50, to be honest. I plan to be a very old man, sitting on this porch with you, watching our great-grandchildren play in the yard." Violet smiled at the image. "That sounds perfect, though I hope we have a few adventures left in us before we get too old and settled." "With you, every day is an adventure," Hayes replied, pulling her close. "Every single day." The ranch continued to thrive as the new century approached. Samuel proved to be an excellent manager, modernizing their operations while maintaining the values his parents had instilled in him. He and Catherine had 3 children by 1900, and the ranch house was once again filled with the sound of young voices. Rose returned from St. Louis with a degree in art, and a marriage proposal from a young lawyer named Jonathan Sterling. They were married in 1899 and settled in Kansas City, though Rose visited the ranch often, and her paintings decorated every wall of the house. The twins both chose to stay on the ranch, each building homes on the property and starting families of their own. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from the next county, and William married a schoolteacher from Wyatt. Between them, they gave Hayes and Violet 6 more grandchildren. Hayes and Violet, now in their late 40s and early 50s respectively, transitioned into the role of matriarch and patriarch of a growing family. They spent their days helping with the grandchildren, maintaining the house and garden, and enjoying the fruits of decades of hard work. In the spring of 1903, 25 years after Hayes had first freed Violet from those shackles, they took a trip back to the spot where the old trading post had stood. The building was long gone, torn down years ago, and the land had returned to prairie grass and wildflowers. They stood hand in hand, looking at the place where their story had begun. "I think about that day sometimes," Violet said quietly, "about how different my life could have been if you had not been there, if you had not cared enough to intervene." "I think about it too," Hayes admitted. "How close I came to just collecting the bounty on Dutch and riding away. I almost did not get involved. I saw you standing there and something in me said to just focus on the job, not to get distracted. But then I saw the fear in your eyes and I remembered Alina, and I knew I could not walk away." "I am glad you did not," Violet said, squeezing his hand. "I am glad you saw me. I am glad you cared." "I will always see you," Hayes promised. "I will always care." They planted a tree there that day, a young oak that they hoped would grow tall and strong, a living memorial to the moment that changed both their lives. As they patted the earth around its roots and gave it water from their canteens, Violet felt a sense of completion, of a circle closing. "We should come back in 25 years, Hayes suggested. "See how big this tree has grown." "That would make us 70 and 75, Violet calculated. "Do you think we will still be around?" "Absolutely," Hayes said with confidence. "I fully intend to live to be 100, and you right along with me. We have too much to live for to go anywhere." And they did have much to live for. The ranch, the family, each other. Every morning, Violet woke up grateful for another day. Every evening, Hayes thanked God for the life he had been given. They had known hardship and loss, struggle and pain, but they had also known love and joy and the satisfaction of building something lasting. The years rolled on, each one bringing changes and constants. Grandchildren grew, new babies were born, loved ones passed away, and life continued its eternal cycle. Through it all, Hayes and Violet remained the steady center, the foundation upon which the family was built. In 1908, on their 30th wedding anniversary, the family threw them a huge celebration. Every child, grandchild, and extended family member came to the ranch for a week-long reunion. There were horse races and barn dances, enormous meals and late-night conversations. Hayes gave a speech at dinner one night, his voice strong despite his 60-some years. 30 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known, he began, looking at Violet with undimmed love. She had been through hell, but she had not broken. She was scared, but not defeated. She was vulnerable, but not weak. I offered her freedom, expecting her to take it and disappear into a new life somewhere far from the pain she had experienced. But she did something I never anticipated. She stayed. She chose to stay with me, to build a life with me, to love me. And every day since then has been the greatest gift I have ever received. He raised his glass. To Violet, my wife, my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children and grandmother of my grandchildren, the woman who taught me what love really means, the woman who made me a better man, the woman I will love until my dying breath and beyond. The family cheered and clinked glasses, and Violet stood to give her own speech, tears streaming down her face. "I was traded for 2 horses once," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet room. "I was treated as property, as less than human. I was on the verge of losing all hope, and then a cowboy rode up and set me free. He asked for nothing in return, expected nothing, just gave me the most precious gift anyone has ever given me, the right to choose my own life." She looked at Hayes, her eyes full of 30 years of love. "I chose you, Hayes Lawson. I chose you then, and I would choose you again every single day. You gave me freedom, but I gave you something too. I gave you my heart, my trust, my loyalty, my love. And you have guarded those gifts carefully, treating them with respect and tenderness. You have been the best husband, the best father, the best man I have ever known." She raised her own glass. "To Hayes, the cowboy who saved me, the man who loved me, the partner who built this incredible life with me. I love you more than words can express." The celebration continued late into the night, with music and laughter echoing across the prairie. Hayes and Violet danced under the stars, moving slowly to the fiddle music, comfortable in each other's arms. 30 years, Violet marveled. "Sometimes it feels like we have been together forever." "Because we have, in all the ways that matter," Hayes replied. "From the moment I saw you, some part of me recognized you, like my soul knew you were meant to be mine." "I felt it too," Violet admitted. "Even in the midst of all that fear and trauma, I felt safe with you. I felt like I had finally found where I belonged." "You did belong. You do belong. Here, with me, with our family, on this land we built together." This is where you were always meant to be." As they danced, Violet looked around at the faces of her family. Her children, grown and strong and good, her grandchildren, bright-eyed and full of promise, her friends and neighbors, people who had become like family over the decades. This was her legacy, hers and Hayes's. Not just the land or the cattle or the house, but this community of love they had created. The ranch continued to prosper as the decade progressed. Samuel, now firmly in charge of operations, proved to have inherited his father's business sense and his mother's management skills. He expanded their breeding program and introduced new techniques he had learned from agricultural journals. The Lawson Ranch became known throughout Missouri and into neighboring states as a source of high-quality cattle and horses. Hayes, now in his 60s, was content to be semi-retired, though he still helped out when needed and loved working with the horses. He had a special gift with them, a patience and understanding that resulted in well-trained, responsive animals. Many ranchers sent their horses to Hayes for training, adding another income stream to the family business. Violet threw herself into her grandchildren, spending hours teaching them to read and to appreciate nature and beauty. She told them stories about the old days, about coming west and building the ranch, though she kept the darkest parts of her own story private. There would be time for those lessons when they were older. In 1910, Violet suffered a health scare when she collapsed in the garden one summer afternoon. Hayes found her and carried her inside, terrified that he was losing her. Dr. Patterson, now ancient himself and training a younger doctor to take over his practice, diagnosed her with heat exhaustion and overwork. "You are not 20 anymore, Violet," the doctor scolded gently. "You need to slow down, rest more, let the younger ones do the heavy work." Violet reluctantly agreed, though she chafed at the restrictions. Hayes, however, took the doctor's orders very seriously. He watched over her carefully, making sure she rested and did not overexert herself. It was his turn to care for her, and he did so with the same tenderness she had always shown him. She recovered fully, but the incident reminded them both of their mortality. They began to talk more seriously about estate planning, about making sure everything was in order for their children. They also talked about what they still wanted to do, places they still wanted to see. "I would like to go back to Kansas City," Violet said one evening. "See where I grew up, visit my parents' graves. I have not been back since before they died." "Then we will go," Hayes promised. "As soon as you are strong enough, we will take a trip." They made the journey in the fall of 1911, taking the train to Kansas City with Rose and Jonathan, who lived there. It was strange for Violet to be back in the city after so many years. So much had changed, but some things remained the same. She found the cemetery where her parents were buried and stood before their graves, Hayes's hand warm in hers. "I wish you could have known them," she told Hayes quietly. "They were good people. They would have loved you. And I wish they could have known what an amazing woman their daughter became," Hayes replied. "They would have been so proud of you." Violet placed flowers on the graves and said goodbye, feeling a sense of peace she had not felt in years. The past no longer had power over her. It was part of her story, but it did not define her. They also visited the farm where Violet had grown up, though it was owned by strangers now. The house was different, painted a new color and expanded with additional rooms, but the land was the same. Violet showed Hayes where the chicken coop had been, where her mother's garden had grown, where her father had built furniture in his workshop. "This is where I learned to be strong," Violet said. "My parents taught me that you work for what you have, that you treat people with respect, that family is everything. Those lessons served me well when times got hard." "They gave you a good foundation," Hayes agreed, "and you built something beautiful on it." The trip to Kansas City gave Violet closure on the past and renewed appreciation for the present. When they returned to the ranch, she felt lighter, more at peace. She threw herself into the holidays, baking and decorating and making sure all the grandchildren received thoughtful gifts. Christmas of 1911 was particularly special. The entire family gathered at the ranch, filling every bedroom and spilling over into the houses of Samuel and the twins. There were 23 people for Christmas dinner, ranging in age from elderly Mrs. Dawson, now 90 and living with Rose and Jonathan, to a newborn grandchild just a few weeks old. Hayes sat at the head of the massive table they had assembled from several smaller tables, looking out at his family with obvious pride and love. Violet sat at the other end, her heart full to bursting with gratitude. This was what they had built together, this legacy of love and family and connection. After dinner, they all gathered in the living room, which was decorated with evergreen branches and homemade ornaments. Samuel played the piano while everyone sang carols. The children performed a nativity play they had rehearsed in secret. Hayes read the Christmas story from the Bible, his deep voice resonating through the room. When it was time for bed, the children were reluctant to leave the magic of the evening. Violet helped get the youngest ones into nightclothes and tucked them into various beds around the house. She sang lullabies and told stories, kissed foreheads and whispered prayers. Finally, late into the night, she and Hayes were alone in their bedroom. They stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit ranch, at the barns and corrals and fields that stretched as far as they could see. "It has been a good life," Hayes said quietly. "The best life," Violet agreed. "I could not have imagined that day in the trading post that this is where I would end up. If someone had told me I would have a husband who adores me, 4 wonderful children, 13 grandchildren, a prosperous ranch, and a community that respects me, I would have thought they were crazy." "You earned every bit of it," Hayes reminded her. "You took the freedom I offered and you used it to build something incredible. I am in awe of you, Violet. I always have been." She turned to look at him, this man who had been her savior, her husband, her partner, her best friend for over 30 years. His hair was silver now, his face lined with age and years of working in the sun, but his eyes still held that same kindness that had first drawn her to him. "I love you," she said simply. "Thank you for giving me this life. Thank you for choosing to share it with me," Hayes replied, pulling her into his arms. They stood there for a long time, holding each other, grateful for every moment they had been given. The years continued their steady march. Grandchildren grew and graduated from school, some going off to college, others choosing to stay on the ranch. New babies were born, carrying the Lawson name and legacy forward. Hayes and Violet continued to be the heart of the family, the repository of wisdom and love that everyone turned to in times of trouble or celebration. In 1915, they made good on Hayes's promise and returned to the spot where they had planted the oak tree 12 years earlier. The tree had grown tall and strong, its branches reaching toward the sky. They sat beneath it, enjoying the shade, and talked about the decades that had passed. "We have been blessed," Violet said. "So incredibly blessed." "We have," Hayes agreed. "Not that it was always easy. We worked hard for what we have. We made sacrifices and difficult choices. But we did it together, and that made all the difference." "Do you remember what you said that first day?" Violet asked. "You said I was free to go wherever I wanted. You gave me a choice." "And you chose to stay," Hayes finished. "Best decision either of us ever made." As the sun set and they prepared to head back to the ranch, Violet took one last look at the oak tree, standing strong and proud against the darkening sky. It was a fitting symbol for their love. Planted in difficulty, nourished by care and commitment, growing stronger with each passing year. The years from 1915 to 1920 brought more changes. The First World War touched even their remote corner of Missouri, with some of the grandsons enlisting and heading overseas. The family worried and prayed, and rejoiced when all of them returned home safely. The war changed the world, but it did not change the fundamental truths that Hayes and Violet had built their life upon: love, family, hard work, and integrity. Hayes's health began to decline as he entered his 70s. He developed arthritis that made it difficult to work with the horses as he once had, and he tired more easily. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Violet never dimmed. They spent more time sitting on the porch together, watching the sun set, holding hands and talking about the old days. Violet, now in her mid-60s, remained relatively healthy and active. She still managed the household, still doted on her grandchildren and now great-grandchildren, still worked in her garden. But she noticed Hayes slowing down, and it worried her. She could not imagine life without him, did not want to imagine it. On their 40th wedding anniversary in October of 1918, the family gathered once again to celebrate. It was a smaller gathering than their 30th anniversary due to the ongoing war and the Spanish flu epidemic, but it was no less meaningful. Hayes and Violet sat together on the porch, surrounded by their children and as many grandchildren as could safely attend. 40 years, Hayes marveled, shaking his head. How did that happen? One day at a time, Violet replied, squeezing his hand. One moment at a time. Samuel stood to give a toast, his voice thick with emotion. My parents have been my example of what a marriage should be for as long as I can remember. They taught me that love is not just a feeling, it is a choice you make every single day. They taught me that partnership means working together, supporting each other, and putting the other person's needs alongside your own. They built this ranch and this family through hard work, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to each other. I hope I can be half the husband and father my dad has been. The family raised their glasses in agreement, and Violet found herself crying happy tears. Hayes pulled her close and kissed her temple. 40 more years, he whispered in her ear. At least, she replied, though they both knew that was unlikely. But they did not dwell on the future they would not have. They focused on the present, on the love that surrounded them, on the legacy they had created. The years from 1918 to 1923 were golden years in many ways. The war ended, the grandsons came home, the flu epidemic passed, and life returned to a more normal rhythm. Hayes and Violet spent their days in quiet contentment, enjoying the fruits of a lifetime of labor. They took short trips to visit Rose in Kansas City and to see other family members scattered across Missouri. They attended weddings and baptisms, celebrated birthdays and holidays, and treasured every moment with their growing family. In the spring of 1923, Hayes fell ill with pneumonia. At 70 years old, his body struggled to fight off the infection. Violet nursed him tirelessly, sitting by his bedside day and night, praying for his recovery. The family gathered, fearing the worst, but Hayes was not ready to go yet. He fought back with characteristic determination, and slowly, gradually, he recovered. By summer, he was back on his feet, though weaker than before. It was a wake-up call for both of them, a reminder that their time was precious and limited. I am not ready to leave you, Hayes told Violet one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Good, because I am not ready to let you go, Violet replied firmly. We still have more life to live. And they did live it, fully and joyfully, for several more years. They saw more great-grandchildren born, attended more weddings, celebrated more holidays. They continued to be the center of the family, the anchors that everyone relied on. In 1928, exactly 50 years after Hayes had freed Violet from those shackles in the Trading Post Yard, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Hayes was 75 and Violet was 70. They were frail now, moving slowly, but their love was as strong as ever. The celebration was massive, with family coming from across the country to attend. There were over 70 people at the ranch that day, representing 4 generations of the family Hayes and Violet had created. The governor of Missouri sent a letter of congratulations, as did several other dignitaries who had heard the story of the Lawson Ranch and its remarkable founders. Hayes stood before the assembled crowd, leaning heavily on a cane but standing proud. 50 years ago, I rode up to a trading post and saw a young woman in shackles. I set her free, expecting nothing in return, but she gave me everything. She gave me her love, her trust, her loyalty. She gave me a family, a home, a reason to live. She gave me the best 50 years of my life. He turned to Violet, tears streaming down his weathered face. You were traded for 2 horses. I set you free, but you chose to stay. And that choice, your choice to stay with me and build this life with me, has been the greatest blessing I have ever received. I love you, Violet Lawson. I have loved you for 50 years, and I will love you for however much time we have left and beyond. Violet stood, her own eyes wet with tears, and took Hayes's hand. You saved my life, Hayes Lawson, but more than that, you gave me a life worth living. You showed me what love really means, what partnership really means. You gave me freedom, and then you gave me everything else. I chose to stay because I saw in you the man I wanted to spend my life with. I chose correctly. I would make that choice again 1,000 times over. I love you with all my heart, now and forever. They kissed, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. It was a moment of pure joy, of celebration of love that had endured for half a century through trials and triumphs, hardships and blessings. The party continued long into the night, but eventually Hayes grew tired and Violet helped him inside to rest. They lay in their bed, the same bed they had shared for 48 years, holding hands in the darkness. Thank you, Hayes whispered, for staying, for choosing me, for loving me. Thank you, Violet whispered back, for freeing me, for seeing me, for loving me. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, hearts joined, 2 souls that had found their perfect match. Hayes passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 months later, just after his 76th birthday. Violet woke to find him still and cold beside her, and her heart shattered into a million pieces. For a long time she just lay there, holding his hand, saying goodbye to the man who had been her everything for 50 years. The funeral was massive, with people coming from all over Missouri and beyond to pay their respects. Hayes Lawson had been a pillar of the community, a man of integrity and honor, beloved by all who knew him. But more than that, he had been a devoted husband, a loving father, a doting grandfather and great-grandfather. He had lived a good life and left behind a legacy that would continue for generations. Violet grieved deeply, as was expected, but she did not break. Hayes had taught her to be strong, had shown her that she was capable of anything. She drew strength from her family, from her memories, from the knowledge that she had been loved completely and had loved completely in return. She lived for 3 more years after Hayes's death, remaining active and involved in the ranch and the family. She told stories about Hayes to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive. She continued to sit on the porch every evening, watching the sunset, feeling his presence beside her even though he was gone. In the fall of 1931, Violet passed away quietly in her sleep, just a few weeks before what would have been her 73rd birthday. Her family found her in her bed, a peaceful smile on her face, clutching a photograph of Hayes. She had lived a full life, a life of love and purpose and meaning. She was buried beside Hayes on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their graves were marked with simple headstones that bore their names, the years of their births and deaths, and a single phrase: "Together forever." The ranch continued under Samuel's stewardship, and then under his children, and then under their children. The Lawson family remained in Missouri, carrying forward the values and legacy that Hayes and Violet had established. The story of how they met, of how Hayes freed Violet and she chose to stay, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of what true love looks like. The oak tree they had planted in 1903 grew to be enormous, a landmark that people pointed to when giving directions. "Turn left at the Lawson Oak," they would say, and everyone knew what they meant. The tree stood for over a century, a living symbol of the love that had started in a trading post yard in 1878 and had grown to touch hundreds of lives. Hayes Lawson had given Violet Kensington her freedom. She had chosen to stay. And from that choice, from that decision to love and be loved, to build and create and nurture, had come something beautiful and lasting. A family, a ranch, a legacy of love that would endure long after both of them were gone. It was a love story for the ages, set in the wild west of Missouri in the late 1800s. A story of redemption and second chances, of freedom and choice, of two souls finding each other against all odds and creating something extraordinary together. Hayes and Violet proved that love, real love, can overcome any obstacle, can heal any wound, can build something lasting and true. And so they lived and loved, and left behind a legacy that would never be forgotten. The cowboy who freed the girl traded for 2 horses, and the girl who chose to stay and build a life with him, together forever in memory and in the land they loved. Their story was complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure. The end was not really an end at all, but rather the beginning of a new chapter carried forward by their descendants, a testament to the power of love to transform lives and create something beautiful from even the darkest circumstances. The Lawson Ranch stood for over 150 years, eventually becoming a historical landmark in Missouri. Tours were given, and visitors walked through the original house that Hayes had built with his own hands. They saw photographs of Hayes and Violet, read letters they had written, and heard the story of their remarkable love. And everyone who heard it walked away with renewed faith in the power of love, in the importance of freedom, and in the beauty of choosing to stay when you could easily have gone.